Have you noticed videos on your feed of people looking slightly off camera with a fancy mic, and it's unclear if anyone's on the other side? Like this person, or him, or her. It looks like they're on a podcast, right? There are a lot of clips from legit podcasts like this or this. But if you go back to these guys and search their profiles, no actual podcasts come up. We reached out to all of them to verify if these clips are part of actual podcasts. We didn't hear back. So why would someone pretend to have a podcast when they don't actually have one? Okay, Ryan, thanks for coming to my podcast, my fake podcast. What do you think of the set?
I think this is great. I'm feeling very entrepreneurial here. I'm ready to found a startup.
You've written about these fake podcasts before. What exactly is happening with all this?
It's pretty simple, which is also pretty confusing. People are setting up a camera like this, and they are talking into a microphone like this, but unlike this, the microphone isn't plugged in. And they're doing it as a promotional strategy, mainly for TikTok. There's a lot of podcasts now, possibly too many for anyone to know whether or not they exist. And certain creators have realized that. So instead of recording 2 hours of people talking, they record a minute of themselves talking to themselves and pretend like it's part of a larger show.
Why is this such a trend now?
I think there's a couple reasons. One, for younger internet users, the podcast is the new TED Talk.
When TED Talks began streaming online in 2006, they became the go-to place to learn about any subject from an expert. That is, until recording equipment became accessible enough for almost anyone to have a studio-quality podcast.
The other one is that they're very easy to do. You don't have to go outside, you don't have to film anything, you just have to buy a microphone and not even know how to use it. A lot of it is sort of your general chat show, but it's typically by people who are saying salacious or offensive or outrageous things. They make it look like an impromptu moment in the middle of a larger podcast. Sort of this interconnected universe of personal finance gurus.
I made $1,000 in a day, and then I made $2,500 in a day, and I keep pushing it.
Porn stars.
If a woman is not planning on putting out every single day, do not even pursue that man.
Influencers who aren't really well known, and pickup artists.
I always advise people to casually date.
All the best people.
What about this setup, this aesthetic, makes it come off so official?
Don't you feel official right now? Don't you feel very professional? I think it is partly a rejection to the peak news era of the Trump administration, right? You're bombarded with news, and younger people especially just can't follow it. But then I think there's another thing happening, which is that for a lot of younger internet users, the top celebrities in their life look like this. They make shows like this. It's the Twitch streamers, the YouTubers, the Instagrammers who are making stuff in their homes.
Would you say that this is misleading, or do you think it's just the new form of content, the new form of podcasting?
I guess it really depends on if you care if the podcast exists, right? I mean, if you look at the clip and you enjoy watching it and it's harmless, you're not really lying. You're just making it look like half of our conversation. I see it more as an evolution of what we expect on camera. You start at the very beginning of film with these massive productions and crazy sets, but as technology has evolved, I think people are more comfortable with someone in their sweatpants and a microphone just gabbing away, which is kind of cool, actually.
Do you think that authenticity has become less important now on TikTok?
I wouldn't say that authenticity is less important, but I do think the podcast clip or the fake podcast clip is a way to heighten that authenticity. It's a way to look like you're still a normal person while adding some production value into it.
And for someone that's thinking right now, I've been watching so much of these, how would they know that they're watching a fake podcast?
The way that I sort of stumbled across this was, one, the audio wasn't coming from the microphone.
It takes 3 seconds to text good morning.
It's directional usually, so if the person's voice isn't directly hitting your ears and you're hearing the room, chances are they're not using a microphone. The second one is if they never show the host or who's asking the question.
Right.
Because a lot of times they'll cut it and be like, oh, yeah, good point.
Yeah.
But then they never show who said it. And then the other one I would say is if you never see the name of the show, because the whole point of the podcast clip is to advertise the podcast. So if at no point in that clip do you see a watermark or you see a link to listen to the whole thing, chances are it's not real. Maybe just Google or ask ChatGPT, whatever, a question about what you're hearing, because it's probably just some guy, or usually some guy just on TikTok just talking. So
there you go.
Be careful. I think it goes back to the old joke, which is that no one has ever sat through an entire Joe Rogan episode. They're just too long. And I think that these younger creators or newer creators who are doing this hack have realized that no one has 3 hours to watch a whole podcast.